Welcome to The Deep Dive, the show where we take a mountain of information and really try to distill it down into the essential insights you need to be genuinely well-informed. Today, we're plunging into a region that, frankly, is just. It's the global epicenter of violent conflicts, mass displacement, humanitarian crises. The Middle East.
Yeah, it really is.
You know, it often feels like a powder keg, right? And on October 7, 2023, the Hamas attacks and Israel's military response.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't just ignite it.
No.
They completely unraveled any attempts at appeasement, brutally exposing just how fragile existing mediation efforts really were. It feels like a moment of profound change.
And it's that complexity, that sheer density that we really want to cut through in this deep dive. Our mission really is to offer you a shortcut, to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights from a whole stack of sources, giving you those surprising facts, those aha moments, so you can feel well-informed without, getting totally overwhelmed.
Think of us as your guides through this incredibly, dense and critical geopolitical landscape. That's right. Over the next half hour or so, we're going to peel back the layers. We'll try to understand the intertwined dynamics of the Iran-Israel conflict,
Which is crucial.
Examine the multifaceted, sometimes paradoxical involvement of the United States.
Always a major factor.
And really dissect the profound impact of Iran's proxy strategy. I mean, this strategy doesn't just project power, does it? It often leverages, even exacerbates, these deep-seated sectarian divisions right across the Middle East.
Absolutely. It's a truly intricate dance of power and politics. And to guide us through this intricate landscape, we've drawn from a really rich and diverse array of sources.
Okay.
Our foundation includes comprehensive reports from, respected institutions like the German Marshall Fund, great for transatlantic insights, and the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, which give us critical data on human rights.
Right, the human element.
Exactly. We also have detailed analyses from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, known for its strategic global perspective, and in-depth research from RAND experts who often dig deep into military and security issues. And to make sure we get a nuanced, multi-perspective view is what's happening on the ground, the geopolitical currents. We've also pulled compelling insights from major news outlets. Think CNN, Times of India, Al Jazeera.
So different angles.
Different angles, different interpretations, lived experiences from the region itself. So with that kind of overview, maybe let's start delving into the core dynamics.
Absolutely. Let's start with what feels like the beating heart of the current regional volatility, the evolving Iran-Israel conflict. This is just such a volatile landscape. And the immediate aftermath of the October 7 attacks has been, well, without exaggeration, an explosion of direct and proxy wars.
Yeah, an explosion is the right word.
We're talking key players like Israel, Iran, Turkey, and a whole host of armed groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, various Syrian factions, all engaged in this escalating, interconnected web of conflict.
It's definitely not just bilateral anymore.
No, it feels like a regional conflagration.
And what's particularly striking, I think, is how quickly the dynamics shifted from that sort of simmering tension to just outright escalation.
Right.
Our sources are indicating that as of, now, June 18th, 2025, the Israel-Iran conflict deepens as U.S. weighs direct intervention.
Wow.
That's not just hypothetical talk anymore. It signals a truly critical moment, suggesting the conflict is moving into an even more dangerous phase.
Direct intervention.
Where external powers might get directly involved. It suggests a potential shift from, indirect confrontation, proxy stuff, to a more overt face-to-face engagement.
Which carries immense risks.
Huge risks, yeah, for regional stability, global stability.
So, from Israel's perspective, how are they viewing this moment?
Well, one source describes it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
To do what?
To, quote, destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities and ability to wreak regional havoc. That's an incredibly strong statement.
It really is. That goes way beyond immediate deterrence.
It's about fundamentally reshaping the regional power balance, it seems. Their ongoing military objectives clearly aim to weaken groups like Hamas and Hezbollah.
Okay, that makes sense.
But, and this is a big but, our sources also highlight a significant concern. Policies like, say, the reoccupation of Gaza, the continued expansion of settlements in the West Bank, ongoing aggressions towards Syria.
Yeah.
Some analysts see these as actually failing to create lasting security or stability for Israel.
So potentially counterproductive in the long run.
Potentially. It suggests this perpetual cycle of conflict, right, where short-term military gains just don't translate into enduring peace.
And this brings up that whole concept of Greater Israel, doesn't it?
It does, and it's important to understand this isn't some fringe extremist view within Israeli politics. Sources suggest it's actually quite common.
Oh, like cup?
Yeah, the idea that borders are flexible, defined by, and I'm quoting here, wherever the boots of the furthest Israeli soldier landed.
That perspective. I mean, that must complicate any efforts towards a stable peace, surely.
Absolutely. It implies this dynamic, expanding territorial claim, not fixed, internationally agreed upon boundaries for, say, a two-state solution. It fundamentally challenges the very idea of a stable, defined regional order.
And the strategic maneuvering goes even deeper, right? Down to basic resources like water.
Yes, water is critical. Israel strategically leverages control over crucial water resources. We're talking the Jordan River, West Bank aquifers.
And they control these.
They control key sources, yes.
Oh.
And they use this control not just for their own needs, but as one source puts it, to solidify its dominance. Water becomes a tool.
A tool against its neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work practically? How does that give them leverage?
Well, it's a critical and often overlooked aspect of power there. By controlling these vital sources, Israel isn't just securing its own supply, it's limiting the access of Palestinians' other neighbors. This creates dependency. It allows them to exert political, economic pressure. The amount of water for Palestinian agriculture, even daily use, can be directly impacted.
Wow.
Which reinforces Israel's geopolitical supremacy in a very tangible, often devastating way for ordinary people. It's a silent but incredibly powerful form of control.
Okay, let's flip to Iran's side of this. Their core strategy seems to be consistently equipping these proxy forces.
That's right. To challenge both U.S. and Israeli interests. It's primarily a way to deter threats against Tehran itself, its security, its nuclear infrastructure, its allies' military capabilities.
Kind of asymmetric warfare.
Exactly. It imposes costs, creates deterrence, without having to engage in direct conventional conflict with, frankly, superior forces.
Right, and we saw that quote from an Iranian official on CNN describing U.S. actions as a betrayal of diplomacy.
Yeah, and asserting Iran will do whatever necessary to protect ourselves if the U.S. strikes its nuclear facilities.
That really reflects this deep-seated distrust, doesn't it? This feeling of being encircled, maybe?
Absolutely, and their unwavering resolve for self-preservation against what they see as existential threats.
And speaking of nuclear facilities, the advancements in Iran's program are alarming for many.
They really are. They've increased uranium enrichment from, 3% up to 60%?
Which is a huge jump.
A massive jump. Now, international atomic agencies, they've asserted they see nothing to suggest that this was going to happen, meaning, no immediate smoking gun for a weapons program.
Right.
But that leap from 60% to the 90% enrichment needed for weapons, it's technically very short.
Right. It's a capability threshold.
Exactly. It presents this constant critical question of trust and intent for the international community. It's a persistent point of tension, a driver behind regional calculations. It's a capability, even if not yet a weapon, that dramatically shifts the balance of power perception.
Absolutely. Now let's get into the sort of military dynamics on the ground. There is that bombshell report suggesting Israel's missile defense systems like Iron Dome, they're nearing breaking point.
Yeah, that was a significant report.
What does nearing breaking point actually mean in this context? And what happens if Iron Dome does get overwhelmed?
Well, nearing breaking point basically implies the system is being severely tested. Think sheer volume, sophistication of incoming threats, rockets, drones.
Like a goalie facing too many shots?
Exactly like that. Too many shots to save them all.
Yeah.
If Iron Dome were overwhelmed, meaning it couldn't intercept enough projectiles to protect civilian areas and infrastructure,
Yeah.
the pressure on Israeli leadership to destroy Hezbollah's capabilities, for instance, would become, quote, unbearable.
Unbearable.
It's not just military strategy, then. It's public confidence, national security. Losing that protective shield would dramatically increase the perceived threat, forcing a much more aggressive, potentially devastating ground campaign against Hezbollah to eliminate the source.
It would completely change the nature of the conflict.
Totally transform it.
It's also interesting, this assessment that neither Israel nor Iran possess significant expeditionary warfare capability.
Right.
That means, for our listeners, the ability to launch and sustain large-scale invasions far from home, right? Like projecting conventional forces across vast distances.
Precisely. You won't see them doing what, say, the U.S. can do logistically.
So this makes those direct overland engagements, maybe through Syria and Iraq, much more critical.
Yes. Those corridors become key strategic ground. But, as you mentioned earlier, wars aren't just about occupying capitals.
No.
They can involve severe retaliation, the destruction of proxies, which is clearly a huge part of Iran's strategy.
And this dynamic where maybe Iran's proxies are weakened and can't deter Israel effectively,
Right.
that exposes vulnerabilities for Iran, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It exposes strategic vulnerabilities. And this situation, according to some analyses, could lead Tehran to double down to accelerate efforts to rebuild proxy capabilities.
Setting the stage for the next round.
Exactly. It's not static. It's a continuous arms race, a strategic cat-and-mouse game. Each side learns, adapts, tries to restore or enhance its advantages, often through these proxies.
Which means the region just stays in this state of perpetual tension.
Always teetering on the edge of the next escalation. Yeah.
So we've laid out these immediate, incredibly volatile dynamics between Iran and Israel, a conflict just intensifying. But of course, you can't discuss the Middle East without talking about the long shadow cast by the United States.
The elephant in the room. Always.
Absolutely. It's the elephant on this regional chessboard. How does Washington's strategy, its deep alliances, its shifts, how does that really shape the landscape of this conflict?
Well, it's fundamental, isn't it? The U.S.-Israel relationship, you hear it described constantly as a vital bond.
Rooted in shared values.
Right. Shared values, rule of law, free markets, tech innovation, that's the narrative. And from Washington's viewpoint, Israel is seen as, and this is a direct quote from a source, the most dependable and the most capable partner America has in the Middle East for advancing U.S. goals.
And that's not just talk.
Not at all. It underpins decades of policy, huge financial and military commitments.
And it seems this partnership has really allowed Israel to leverage this steadfast American support, as the sources call it, to pursue its own goals. Especially perhaps in the context of what's described as the absence of substantive U.S. and European commitment to the peace process and the two-state solution.
That's a really crucial observation. It highlights how maybe international disengagement or perceived apathy can create these vacuums that certain actors then, well, exploit.
Right. And what's fascinating is how the U.S.'s strategic prioritization is focused on deepening Israel's regional integration, security, diplomacy, trade, investment. How that focus, intentionally or not, seems to have effectively circumvented a just resolution to the Palestinian question.
That's a critical point from some analyses, yeah. It highlights a shift in focus. And historically, it wasn't always this way, right? Despite early political support, the U.S. actually had an arms embargo on Israel during its War of Independence, 1948-49.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Israel had to get weapons elsewhere. It wasn't the unshakable military partnership we see today. Policy evolves.
So when did that shift really accelerate?
Well, arguably, it became more pronounced during the Obama administration. Remember the pivot to Asia? That reorientation away from the Middle East, plus the engagement with Iran over the nuclear deal. That shift, maybe unintentionally, emboldened the regime in Tehran, according to some sources. And that led Arab countries who felt maybe the U.S. wasn't as committed or was warming up to Iran.
They started looking elsewhere.
They increasingly turned to Israel for deterrence against Iran. It profoundly realigned regional alliances.
And the money involved in this security cooperation is just huge.
Massive. We're talking significant annual foreign military financing, FMF, basically grants for Israel to buy U.S. military gear.
Right.
Cooperative programs, joint R&D stuff, and planned future foreign military sales, direct sales of advanced hardware.
You mentioned some figures.
Yeah. Projections for, say, 2029 show $4 billion in FMF alone. Looking further out, 2039, Israel's projected to start a $250 million per year increase in foreign military sales.
Wow. This isn't just cash, is it? This signals something much deeper.
Absolutely. It signifies a deep commitment to maintaining Israel's QME, its qualitative military edge in the region.
QME, right.
It's about interoperability, shared intelligence, preferential access to cutting-edge tech few others get. It's not transactional. It's a strategic underpinning that shapes regional power dynamics for decades. It gives Israel a confidence in its defense few others have.
And looking forward, there are recommendations to deepen this further.
Yeah. Things like establishing a regional working group with Israel for allied nations, strengthening cybersecurity partnerships, leveraging Israel's world-class cyber ecosystem. These are seen as force multipliers for U.S. interests, especially now when cyber is as critical as conventional arms.
Okay, let's talk about U.S. interests and the risks involved here. From that cold, hard geopolitical perspective, competition with Russia and China.
Right.
Some experts argue the best option for the United States is to let Israel continue its attacks on Iran.
The logic being?
The logic being that Weakening Iran de facto harms the interests of the other two powers, since Iran is aligned with Russia and increasingly with China.
It's a calculation that definitely prioritizes global power dynamics, maybe over immediate regional stability.
But it carries immediate risks, doesn't it?
Huge risks. We saw the U.S. taking precautions before Israeli strikes, evacuating non-essential personnel from places like Bahrain, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, moving U.S. naval assets towards the Middle East as defensive forces.
Preparing for potential retaliation.
Exactly. Anticipating potential Iranian retaliation against American targets. It underscores that constant balancing act, strategic goals versus immediate safety.
And you have to acknowledge the inherent risk, right? That regime change in the Middle East is a particularly fraught business.
Oh, absolutely. No guarantee of a positive outcome. History is just littered with examples. Iraq, Libya, where interventions, even with good intentions, had unintended, destabilizing, often catastrophic consequences.
And this is all happening within this broader context, isn't it? This era of intensifying competition between the U.S. and its allies and an axis of hostile revisionist powers led by the Chinese Communist Party, Iran, North Korea, and Russia.
It's a global chessboard now. Regional conflicts are increasingly tangled up with these great power rivalries.
And China's role in the Middle East seems to be expanding significantly.
It really is. It's a relatively new dynamic, but very noticeable. Unlike the U.S., China seems willing to ignore U.S. sanctions regimes and fund large-scale infrastructure projects across the region.
Why the Belt and Road Initiative and things like that.
Exactly. And a clear example of their growing influence was brokering that Iran-Saudi reconciliation recently. That showed engagement way beyond just economics.
So they could potentially exploit this perceived loss of normative soft power by the U.S. and EU.
That's the argument. Position themselves as an unbiased mediator, expand their own influence without the historical baggage Western powers carry in the region.
What about Russia's influence? Is that shifting too?
It seems to be. For example, the hypothetical fall of the Assad regime in late 2024, if that were to happen, would be a big deal.
How so?
It would effectively sever Iran's land bridge to the Levant, which in turn would also weaken Russia's influence in the Eastern Mediterranean. These regional shifts have major ripple effects globally.
And it's worth noting, right, that if the U.S. has been reluctant in the past to sell certain technologies or give security guarantees to Gulf states.
Yeah, maybe trying to maintain Israel's QME or just shifting priorities.
That could make partnerships with Russia or China look more appealing to those regional actors.
Absolutely. If your traditional security partner isn't fully meeting your perceived needs, you naturally start looking elsewhere. It further complicates the geopolitical map, fragments security architectures.
Okay, this is a perfect pivot. Let's dive deep into Iran's regional influence, specifically this proxy playbook.
Yeah, this is core to their strategy.
It's not just a tactic, is it? It's defined in the sources as a potent tool for gaining regional influence and power projection.
And critically, it allows Tehran to achieve strategic goals while theoretically, quote, escaping the costs of direct military engagement and international backlash.
That deniability factor.
Exactly. It often creates doubts about denominating the responsibility for attacks. You see how hard it is internationally to definitively attribute actions. It gives Iran that plausible deniability.
Protects them from direct retribution.
To a degree, yes. And this strategy has evolved hugely. It started with early groups like Hezbollah, Al-Hijaz, Badr in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain. By 2019, it had expanded to over a dozen groups across the region. And the key facilitator here is the IRGC Quds Force.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps Special Unit.
Right. They're the organizers, the trainers, the suppliers for these networks.
So who are the key players in this proxy network? What are they actually doing?
Well, first up, Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria. Very active, targeting Israeli assets, interests, even using advanced drones described as a fierce and evasive threat. These aren't simple anymore.
No, getting quite sophisticated.
Definitely. Then, of course, Hamas in Palestine. Their role in the October 7 attacks is tragically clear, plus their history of rocket fire from Gaza since 2007. Their actions often directly reflect Iranian regional aims.
And Iraq.
In Iraq, we see the IRGC mobilizing Shiite militias groups like Kataib Hezbollah specifically to counter U.S. influence and presence.
Okay.
These Iranian-supported groups have consistently launched attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria. It's a direct, persistent challenge.
What about Yemen? the Houthis.
Oh, Iranian support there is very evident. Sources talk about sending an ammunition manufacturing team to Yemen, Hezbollah advisors helping the Houthis, providing things like Cornet anti-tank guided missiles, even altering shipping routes for military gear to dodge sanctions.
Quite extensive. And it reaches even further, doesn't it? Afghanistan.
Yeah, that was revealing. Sources show the IRGC Quds force provided weapons, explosives, roadside bombs to elements of the Afghan Taliban, intercepted by British and U.S. forces.
Wow, so it's not just about Shia groups.
Not exclusively. It highlights the really extensive reach of this network. Iran seems willing to support diverse groups, even outside their immediate sectarian alignment, if it serves their strategic interests against, say, the U.S.
And the key strategic position physically is this unbroken strategic ground route.
Arguably, yes. Stretching from Iran across Iraq into Syria, ending at the tip of Lebanon, reaching the Mediterranean.
That's Iran's most powerful strategic position.
It gives them significant logistical and strategic leverage, a physical corridor for weapons, personnel, influence, flowing directly to proxies.
Which explains that controversial claim back in 2014 by an Iranian lawmaker, Ali Reza Zaghani.
Right, claiming Iran controlled 4 Arab capitals, Baghdad, Beirut, Damascus, and Sana'a.
Widely criticized as an overstatement.
But it speaks to this perceived and, in some cases, very real depth of influence far beyond Iran's borders.
There was also that comment about Greater Iran, seeing Iraq as the center of Iranian heritage, culture, and identity.
Yeah, from a senior advisor to former President Rouhani. Again, criticized for perceived imperialistic undertones. But it underscores this vision from Tehran that extends beyond physical borders, seeing neighbors as part of a broader cultural strategic sphere.
So how does Iran actually fund and support this whole playbook?
Well, they fund, proselytize, recruit, train, often in camps on Iranian territory, and arm a variety of actors.
Okay.
It's particularly notable in places like Bahrain. Iran seems to avoid direct involvement there because of past failures, preferring the deniability of the proxy approach. It's a clandestine operation.
Now, here's something truly counterintuitive, showing the layers here. Hamas. They have a sophisticated financial network.
They do. Separate resources for military, political, social services branches. They use entities like Beit al-Mal, an investment arm, even hold a stake in Al-Aqsa International Bank. Shows real financial sophistication.
But the really astonishing part, Qatar provides significant financial support, hundreds of millions.
Yes, pledged for reconstruction, other things.
And controversially, Israel's own government, under Netanyahu, actually supported these payments for years.
That's the deeply controversial aspect, yes.
Why? What was the thinking? It seems insane now.
The strategic gamble, flawed as it proved, was to bolster Hamas as a counterweight to the more secular Palestinian Authority in the West Bank.
To divide Palestinian leadership.
Exactly. The hope was to prevent a unified Palestinian front, sideline the PA, and avoid pressure for a comprehensive peace deal needing tough concessions on territory or settlements, keep them divided, keep them weaker negotiators.
But looking back, a catastrophic miscalculation.
Absolutely. You see the stark reality now. Short-term tactical gain led to catastrophic long-term strategic vulnerability. It created this powerful, ideologically driven adversary that, ironically, Israel itself inadvertently helped finance and empower.
Wow, it just underscores the unpredictable nature of proxy politics.
And the profound dangers of unintended consequences in this complex game.
And it's further complicating things. China's willingness to ignore U.S. sanctions regimes. That could provide another lifeline for Iran.
Potentially, yes. Funding infrastructure projects, maybe other avenues for resources. It undermines the premise of international sanctions, makes it harder to exert economic pressure, potentially allowing Iran to keep funding proxies regardless of Western pressure.
Okay, so we've looked at the proxy strategy, the funding. But behind all this geopolitical maneuvering, there's a massive human cost.
A profoundly tragic human cost, yeah. Often exacerbated by these sectarian divides.
It's not just state strategy, it's people caught in the middle. Let's peel back that layer. Talk about the sectarian undercurrents, the impact on populations.
It's crucial, and it starts within Iran itself. The Sunni Muslim population there, often in underdeveloped, marginalized areas, they face pervasive discrimination in employment and political leadership.
Treated like second-class citizens.
Often, yes. And activists pushing for their rights face harsh treatment. It shows internal religious tensions that mirror the broader region.
And it's not just Sunni Shia, right? Even within the Shia community.
We see that too. Look at Ayatollah Burjurdi, a dissident Shia cleric advocating separation of religion and state. suffered severe abuse in prison, lived under house arrest. Shows the regime's intolerance for dissent, even from within.
And Christians?
For Christian worshippers, church leaders, sentencing has gotten much harsher. There's systematic spread of anti-Christian sentiment in state media, anti-Christian publications proliferating.
And severe penalties online.
Death sentences for apostasy or insulting the sacred online. Lengthy prison terms for political or religious commentary on social media. It's a grim picture of pervasive religious discrimination.
Now, looking outward, proxy warfare and sectarian violence across the region, Syria seems like a major flashpoint.
Devastating. Sources say the Syrian government continued to target and depopulate Sunni Muslim-dominated areas, using military force to change demographics.
And critically, Iran-backed militias are involved.
A massive spike, according to sources, in the involvement of these Syrian local defense forces. These are militias backed, funded by Iran, integrated into the Syrian army, in sectarian violence specifically targeting Sunni Muslims.
So it's organized, religiously motivated violence.
It appears so, and it's not one-sided. You have al-Qaeda affiliates like HTS attacking Shia pilgrims, too. It's brutal, multi-directional violence everyone suffers.
What about Iraq?
In Iraq, that U.S. Sanctions Act, the Iranian Proxies Terrorist Sanctions Act of 2017, specifically targeted groups like Asaib al-Ahaq and Harakat Hizballah al-Doba for having carried out sectarian crimes throughout Syria. Often, Iran organized these Shiite militias ostensibly against ISIS, but their actions frequently served sectarian agendas, fueling violence against Sunnis.
So counterterrorism gets dangerously tangled with sectarianism.
Perpetuating violence instead of resolving it, yeah.
And Yemen shows how complex these alliances get, right? Hamas, a Sunni group, supported the Saudi intervention against the Shia Houthis, who are also backed by Iran.
Exactly. It seems paradoxical, but it shows these incredibly complex, shifting allegiances. It's not always a simple Shia-Sunni divide. Pragmatic alliances can override religious ones sometimes.
Then Bahrain. Iran using the proxy playbook again due to deniability.
Seems so. Preferring that approach despite the majority Shia's population feeling marginalized by the Sunni rulers there. And in Saudi Arabia, sources document discrimination against Shia Muslims' mosque restrictions. Limited public roles, though that's mainly Saudi state policy, not directly Iranian proxies. But it adds to the overall sectarian landscape.
Okay, Pakistan, this sounds particularly complex on the sectarian front.
It really is. Escalated violence between Sunni Deobandi and Shia Muslims. And crucially, the fear of Iranian encroachment actually fueled the rise of hardline Sunni Deobandi groups like Sipa-e-Sahaba Pakistan, SSP.
So regional fears directly fuel local sectarianism.
Explicitly. SSP engages in fierce anti-Shia and anti-Iran rhetoric, creates violent internal divisions.
And these groups link up with transnational terrorists.
Yes, these Sunni Deobandi militants have links to al-Qaeda, Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, escalates their capacity for violence.
And on the other side, Iran's influence.
You see Iranian-trained Sipa-e-Mohammed activists targeting rival groups. And the MWM party, a Shia political group, has an office in Qom, Iran. Its leaders meet with high-ranking Iranian and Hezbollah officials.
So deep entanglement of external influences in Pakistan's internal sectarian violence.
Overt entanglement, yeah. Showing how these broader tensions manifest in localized, devastating violence. The human cost is just immense.
So what is the overall human cost, especially for Sunni populations in areas hit by Iranian proxy activity?
It's devastating. Mass displacement, severe persecution, a significant death toll. These aren't just abstract concepts. They link directly to descriptions of mass crimes against civilians. A tragic, ongoing consequence of these proxy conflicts fueled by sectarianism.
Have there been any efforts to counter this extremism?
Some limited efforts from within the region. Saudi Arabia has initiatives like the Ideological Warfare Center, the Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology. They dismissed thousands of clerics for spreading extremism.
But it persists.
Unfortunately, yes. Intolerant rhetoric still persists in Friday sermons online. It's a huge challenge. Deeply ingrained ideologies are hard to dismantle.
Okay, let's try to shift our gaze forward now. Potential outcomes, paths to stability. If any exist.
A big if.
In the short term, Israel seems to be in this precarious position, on constant alert, even if they're seen as a strategic winner in some ways.
Right. It implies this prolonged state of conflict, needing sustained military action, high alert, no clear end in sight.
Which leads to that chilling forever wars perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, the idea that there will be another enemy, another brutal tyranny which will want to exterminate Israel. if something fundamental doesn't change.
And that raises a critical question about Israel itself.
Yeah.
Right? Its long-term viability as a democratic state, threatened not just externally, but maybe by its own internal actions and policies that perpetuate instability.
Can a nation perpetually live on the sword without changing its own character? It's a profound question.
But maybe there's a glimmer of hope. This trend among other regional powers, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt.
Right. Increasingly embracing diplomacy, nonviolent foreign policies over just military involvement in these protracted conflicts.
That feels like a significant shift.
It is. We see concrete examples. Saudi Emirati initiatives on Yemen, serious diplomatic moves, Saudi involvement in post-Assad Syria, engaging politically. Egypt trying to stabilize Libya, Sudan, the Horn of Africa through mediation.
A move away from purely military solutions.
It seems so, yeah.
What about Turkey's position? How's that evolving?
Also crucial. That hypothetical fall of Assad in late 2024, that would be a major geopolitical victory for Ankara.
Because it severs Iran's land bridge, weakens Russia.
Exactly. And Turkey seems focused now not on regime change in Iran itself, but more pragmatically on curtailing Iranian influence in Syria, aligning with its own security interests.
And Egypt's role in Gaza, still mediating.
Still vital, yeah. A crucial interlocutor. But the relationship with Israel is strained. Sources mention persistent intransigence from Israel on humanitarian aid, control of border crossings like Rafah.
So humanitarian issues can derail diplomacy.
Absolutely. Adds another layer of complexity.
We also can't forget the Abraham Accords.
No, a significant realignment. Fostered normalization between Israel and several Arab nations, UAE, Bahrain, others. It shifted perceptions, making regional countries view Israel as a stronger deterrent against Iran. Reshaped alliances.
And China might step into this perceived power vacuum.
Potentially exploit that loss of normative soft power by the U.S. and EU, position itself as unbiased, expand its influence with a different model of engagement.
So all of this points to, what, an undeniable reality?
That the responsibility for ending these conflicts, fostering stability, now rests squarely on the shoulders of the region's major actors.
They have to take proactive steps.
They must take proactive steps to reshape the Middle East's future. Actively explore things like collective security arrangements. It's a call for regional ownership.
And these frameworks, if they happen, could genuinely help.
If implemented genuinely, yes. Could reduce tensions, mitigate conflicts, open avenues for peaceful settlements and long-term stability. Ultimately, the willingness to embrace collaboration will determine whether the Middle East can transcend its cycles of violence.
The stakes couldn't be higher.
Truly at a crossroads.
And reflecting on that forever wars mindset, that question is so haunting. Who wants to live this life? Getting killed every 2 or 3 years, another attack, more killed people. It's just a powerful call for change. Reflects the exhaustion, the human cost.
It really does. Yet, there's that glimmer of historical perspective, maybe. Just as Germany became Israel's strongest ally after being its worst enemy.
A profound transformation.
It suggests things are changing. Maybe the future cannot be judged solely according to the present. It offers this fragile hope that cycles can be broken. Transformation is possible if leaders, populations are willing to re-envision relationships.
Ultimately, this whole deep dive just underscores this urgent, desperate need for a new vision. A vision beyond just living on the sword, beyond embracing conflict as the default.
It's profoundly challenging, but absolutely essential for any path forward, for everyone in the region. So we've navigated quite a bit. The intensifying Iran-Israel conflict, the complex U.S. role, Iran's intricate proxy network, the devastating sectarian divisions. Our aim really was to give you a clear, detailed, hopefully engaging understanding of a region in constant tumultuous flux, where every action has these cascading consequences.
And as we leave you today, maybe consider this provocative thought. It comes directly from the sources we looked at. If systemic injustice has been the principal driver of conflicts in the Middle East since 1948, as one source profoundly suggests, then what does genuine justice truly look like for all populations in the region? And maybe more importantly, how far are its leaders and the international community willing to actually go to achieve it?
A crucial question to ponder.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.